I think it is clear to believe in the power of ideas.
Fresh thinking to the Manhattan Institute.
Good evening. I have the honor of introducing Governor Mitch Daniels of Indiana to you tonight. Let me say first what a privilege really it is and an honor to follow men like Paul Singer and Ed Koch and Cardinal Dolan up here for my bit part on this stage, and to precede Mitch and also Heather McDonald and Roberta Wilson. It's the best cast of characters I've had a small part in since maybe forever, so I should retire after this night. Paul mentioned Mitch Daniels' extraordinary career in the private sector in Washington and obviously as governor of Indiana. I won't go over it all. I'll simply say this, that in his 7.5 years as governor, Mitch has put Indiana in a very strong fiscal position. Its credit rating is AAA now, the first time in Indiana's state history. He spearheaded public sector union reform, education reform, and fiscal reform. Indiana has consistently now outperformed all of its neighboring states in employment, in job growth, in economic growth, and many such statistics. And most striking of all the material I've read about Mitch's performance as governor, Indiana now has the fewest state employees per capita in the nation. And the fewest state employees. Indiana has the fewest state employees it's had since 1975. Mitch has, I think, 6 or 7 more months in office, so he can at least get back to 1955, I think, by the time he leaves office. I will say one thing. When I spent a fair amount of 2011 urging Mitch Daniels to run for president, and it's a little late, you know. I mean, where were you when I needed you? But it's all worked out fine. Mitch showed his usual good sense by ignoring me. But in the course of this, I talked with many of his fellow governors, and this is true, including people like Jeb Bush, with whom he overlapped for a couple of years. Jeb was finishing up when Mitch began as governor. Governors like Haley Barbour and Bobby Jindal, who have overlapped for most of Mitch's tenure. Younger governors who've come in at different stages in Mitch's 7.5 years in Indiana, Chris Christie in New Jersey, Bob McDonnell in Virginia, Scott Walker in Wisconsin. And each of them, I would say, am I crazy in pushing Mitch for this? He really is the best governor in the nation and has been the best governor in the nation for the last decade. Isn't that true? And all of these other governors, really without exception, and these are not people without some ego of their own, all said absolutely. And really they did. And all the younger governors, and I think if you talk to Chris Christie and Scott Walker and many others, they'll say that they're following in Mitch's footsteps, and he blazed a trail that they're now blazing in their own way and with their own challenges and their own impressive accomplishments. But really what Mitch has done in the 7.5 years as governor of Indiana, I known him a long time. I knew him as a very successful private sector executive, as a very successful Washington cabinet member at the Office of Management and Budget, way back earlier as a staff guy for Senator Lugar. But really what he's done as governor is an important reminder that, you know, we can govern ourselves successfully, that no matter how broken we sometimes think our government is and our politics is, it is susceptible to real leadership, intelligent and principled and politically shrewd leadership. Mitch was elected in 2004, re-elected by a much greater margin. I think he got the most votes any statewide candidate has ever gotten in Indiana in 2008, carried the state by 18 points. at the same time that President Obama was carrying the state as a Democrat. So it's not just that he's a man of principle and a good, strong, tough executive. He also knows how to make the politics work along with the policy, which obviously is awfully important and awfully impressive, really pretty rare, and a really remarkable accomplishment for which he deserves the Alexander Hamilton Award. He's being awarded tonight. Alexander Hamilton, I'll just say a word, is, I think, probably the greatest American political figure in our history never to have become president. And in that respect, Mitch is a suitable recipient of that award. I had a couple of theories about 2016 and 2020, but I won't go into these. It's really a great honor for me to introduce you to Governor Mitch Daniels.
It's written that Lincoln was once approached at a county event in Illinois. A speaker had canceled, and the sponsor of the evening asked him if he could fill in. Lincoln asked, "How long do you want me to talk?" And the host said, "Why do you ask?" He said, "Well, if you want 3 hours, I'm ready now. If you want 3 minutes, it's going to take some time to prepare." Those of you who give a lot of speeches know just what he meant. There's so much one could say, so much I'd like to say, but mercifully, from your standpoint, will not tonight, about the occasion, about the Manhattan Institute, about the other people involved here. I'll endeavor very diligently to be more succinct, really, than the occasion or those people would warrant. But let me start by saying how great a thrill it was to meet the Archbishop and to be part of the same program on which he was honored. I frequently encounter people in my home state who, men and women of the cloth or religious figures who generally will say something kind about our service. And I always tell them, no, I deal in the trivial and the temporary. You deal in the permanent and the important. And I say that to you, Archbishop Dolan, with profound respect for your career and all you mean to this city, to this nation, and to the world for that matter. The Archbishop's reputation is such that I was put in mind, I just can't resist repeating a story that I was told by President Clinton one time at the transition after the passing of a pope, according to Clinton. In his highly political state in Arkansas, two old boys are sitting on the porch rocking. One says, "I heard they're getting ready to elect a new pope." And the other said, "Yep." Said, "You got a candidate?" He said, "No, just so long as it's not a Catholic. They had it the last time." Just as it is a treat to read Bill Kristol, listen to Bill Kristol on Sunday, or follow his intellectual leadership of causes that I hold dear, it was great privilege for me that someone selected him to bring me up here today. Of all the things one could say about Kristol, let's just say this. What a challenge in life to be Irving Kristol's son, a man so great and so... What a remarkable achievement to live up to that legacy, and Bill, you have in every way. Likewise, I could give entire oration here about the Manhattan Institute. I would go anywhere that this organization asked me to. Steadily over the decades now in which I've been trying to pay close attention to trends and ideas and events in our public life, this organization has risen and expanded its reach and its scope and its influence. And I just cannot say enough to praise Paul and all those who have made it what it is, and tell you how profoundly grateful I am to be associated with it in any way, and especially in this one. Let me just concentrate these few thoughts on the special privilege I derive from any association with the name of Alexander Hamilton. A previous awardee, if I recall correctly, Mr. Chernow, wrote a great book. I pulled it down this last week from the shelf on which biographies of the founders reside, and his is the best that I've read about the great American in whose name this honor exists. And as Bill said, this is probably, certainly Ron Chernow said, this is the foremost figure in our history who did not serve as president. We remember Hamilton for his wisdom, much of which is so pertinent today. Just thumbing through those several hundred pages, every so often there was something that speaks to the moment we are in. He said that the accumulation of debt is, quote, perhaps the natural disease of all governments. We got a very serious case these days and needs a little medical attention. He warned against the printing of money and all the pernicious effects that can come to that. One that maybe fewer people will remember, I needed to be reminded. Hamilton was a supply-sider. He argued against too excessive a tariff when the federal government began imposing those. That experience has shown that moderate duties are more productive than high ones. But if he's associated with any idea in our memory, it is probably the notion of energy in the executive. He was a staunch proponent in a balanced system, in a system of shared and separated powers, of a vigorous executive authority. And in our day, I think sometimes people who accept and understand the need for sharply and severely limited government sometimes do, however, I think, lapse into a small confusion here, in which energetic, if someone were to use that term, is thought synonymous with expansionist, and they're not at all. As a matter of fact, in Hamilton's view, and my view, an energetic executive is sometimes the very best defender and promoter of individual liberty and freedom that our system makes possible. Hamilton wrote, not in Federalist 10 or 8 or 7 or 5 or 3, in Federalist 1, he wrote, the vigor of government is essential to the security of liberty. And in our day, we're going to need an energetic executive in order to secure to our progeny the blessings of the liberty that has always characterized this land. There's a little phrase from Churchill that it's always stuck with me. He wrote in one of the histories he authored that he saw the Victorian age, he said, as a golden age, that golden age when liberalism was an aggressive, unshackling force. Liberalism properly understood, classical liberalism. What many people in this room probably agree with, even though we sometimes use different labels today. Well, I can just tell you that in attempting to unshackle our fellow citizens, to promote their liberty and enable them to exercise it to the fullest. When we reformed education or cut property taxes to the lowest in America and capped them constitutionally, when we gave tens of thousands of low-income citizens health savings accounts so they could make their own decisions about their health care, about those most personal of choices, when we became the first state to, basically since the Taft-Hartley Act, the first northern industrial state this year to pass a right-to-work law. In all these respects and more, we were attempting to expand freedom and protect freedom and unshackle the citizens of this land. And that there was a lot of something we were expending, and I think it was energy. Now, one other point that Hamilton made that I sometimes I think also is lost, and that is was captured in his phrase that sound and effective government is the most reliable custodian of liberty. He said somewhere, a government ill-executed, whatever its theory, must be in practice bad government. This is something I have come to believe devoutly. There are many people who have absorbed the lessons of history and who are working assiduously and effectively to return government to its proper limits, to confine it to its proper sphere. And we certainly have worked hard at that in our little corner of this country. But some folks have left unattended the second, I think, corollary responsibility, and that is, within that limited sphere of proper and necessary government activities, there's an equally solemn duty to deliver those services as effectively as possible. Just as it is, to me, a cardinal sin, excuse me, Archbishop, to take a dollar through the coercive power of the state from a free citizen for an unnecessary purpose. It is but it is equally, I think, violative of liberty and of one's duty in public life to, having taken that dollar, to allow it to be spent with less than full effect. And so we work and work and work to make certain that inside that narrow sphere, that the citizens of Indiana receive the very best service. If you go to one of our licensed branches for a Bureau of Motor Vehicles, you will be out last month in 9 minutes and 38 seconds, and 97% of the time you will be satisfied. I won't bore you with examples, but I've got a lot of them. We measure everything. We pay people in our state government, unique in America now, on a performance basis, and there's no better way. There's no more certain way to get one of the biggest, one of the high increases on the right side of our bell curve than to find a way to save taxpayer dollars and economize, deliver a service better, or deliver it as well at the same price. Now, I only make a point of that because I think there's a large implication that's as urgent now as it's been maybe in the history of our republic. In rooms like this, I frequently offer the thought that skepticism about big government, which is as healthy as mom's apple pie, should not be allowed to become contempt for all government. The Manhattan Institute, among its innumerable contributions to the public understanding, took a poll last year, which I have cited often, and which means the world to me. They surveyed the people of the various states and found in Indiana 77% of the respondents believed their state government was effective and efficient. It was the second highest in America to Montana, and I'm not sure what government does in Montana. But to me, this is extraordinarily important, because while we never want to lose our healthy skepticism, our vigilance to make certain that government stays within its bounds and lives within its means, ultimately, we do want a government that earns and keeps the confidence of the American people. In a democratic system, a people which utterly loses confidence, becomes completely cynical about its government, may one day exchange liberty for authoritarianism. This we must never permit. And so, in the name of Hamilton and in his tradition, I hope we'll all look for ways to support energetic and vigorous government, restoring the promise of this country, pulling back from the brink of fiscal and moral and economic catastrophe will require a lot of energy. It will require, I believe, an energetic executive for all the good that I hope a newly constituted Congress may do. And I hope that we'll all read a little more about Hamilton as we prepare for the day when new leadership and new government takes up that challenge. Mayor Koch evoked the name of his honor, the first Mayor Daley, in his tribute to the Archbishop. And whenever that name comes up, I'm always reminded of one of those great Daleyisms. On some occasion like this, Mayor Daley said that he felt that he had reached the pinnacle of success. And so tonight do I. Thank you very much.
I think it is clear how fortunate we are to believe in the power of ideas.
Supply the common sense and the fresh thinking of the Manhattan Institute.